All right, it's time for some combat radio, and the movie is Commando. Arnold Schwarzenegger is a commando who goes on a rampage after his daughter is kidnapped by members of his former unit, and a quagmire of destruction and chaos ensues. With me to break the movie down is everyone's favorite showrunner, director, producer, and actor, a man who actually interviewed Charles Manson once upon a time, Mr. Jude Press. Jude, how are you?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm good. Commando.
Commando. Always talk about movies like this.
Pretty straightforward. Doesn't pretend to be anything it isn't.
Here's my main question about films like this. It's the one. I mean, and you could talk about Marvel films also. There is never any repercussions for all of the massive disaster damage that's caused to buildings, cities. Ray Dong Chong shoots a rocket launcher backwards, destroys an entire building. Nobody really ever talks about it. It's those elements to these types of movies are always funny to me.
Well, that's a good point, actually. In fact, that moment you're talking about, Ray Dong Chong, who's actually good in the movie.
Yeah, great.
She blows. They raid a Big Five at one point. He drives a tractor through like Circus of Guns or whatever it is. And he pops some invisible switch at the counter, opens up an armory, which I don't doubt those places exist.
Yeah.
And he starts loading up on all sorts of an arsenal of illegal weapons, including bazookas and stuff. And she decides at one point, he gets arrested, thrown in the back of a paddy wagon. She decides she's going to shoot a rocket at it, because that's the best way to get him out of there, is by firing a rocket down a major Los Angeles boulevard. But before that happens, always good. Yeah. Hey, you know what? And I love that her response is, I read the directions. It's like when you plant a claymore mine and it says, put front towards enemy. Anyway, so he's in the truck talking to the two cops who arrested him. He's like, call Colonel Kirby. Tell him he'll explain everything to you. And, it's like there's a guy who can pick up the phone and say, yeah, don't worry about the fucking shit he's blown up or the fact he drove a tractor. Don't worry about the acts of terrorism.
Yeah.
He's fine. He's good to go. He's a commando. He's commando.
He's one of the good guys. Yeah.
He's one of the good guys. How do we know? Because the dudes he's killing are bad. But the movie actually Schwarzenegger is fantastic in the movie. He pulls it off. In fact, he's the reason it's watchable.
Yeah.
We've had the director of the film, Mark Lester, on the show before, who told us
many times. I always end up hanging out with him for a bit at the DGA Awards, the Directors Guild Awards. He's always there, and we end up at the same table together talking for a while.
Well, that could be a good or bad thing. And
he's also the man that directed Roller Boogie, so you got to give him Roller Boogie.
And Firestarter, so we'll cut him some slack.
Yeah.
Obviously, Vernon Wells, who plays the villain Bennett from The Road Warrior, he's been a guest on the show and told us some production stories, and we're going to get to all of that. But to start with, basically, the movie begins with Bill Duke, who we love, putting out a hit to start killing members of Schwarzenegger's old unit. And this is the most inefficient bullshit hit I think I've ever seen in film history, because they back up a garbage truck, kill the guy, and initially I thought they're using the garbage truck to throw the body in. They don't even do that. They just shoot him on the street of like Calabasas, leave the body, and then they roll out in a garbage truck, and nobody puts their hand up when they plan this hit and goes, hey man, garbage truck, is that the best vehicle to leave a scene of a hit? I mean, whatever. So that's how the movie opens. The next death is a car salesman who, for whatever reason, Bill Duke jumps in the Cadillac because, and this is a quote from the film, I like Cadillacs. Yeah. And he races off. Yeah. He races off.
This is one of the most quippy. It's rated as one of not only Arnold's, but one of the best movie for those quips before somebody gets killed or is about to be killed.
Well, there's a lot of well-known quips in it. I'm not sure if they're the best quips from a Schwarzenegger film. I mean, there's a couple of, you can still feel Schwarzenegger. And I worked with Schwarzenegger at Warner Brothers and loved working with him. I was actually inspired by his work ethic. So I have nothing from a work-related standpoint but good things to say about Schwarzenegger. His personal life is another matter, and I don't know if we're fit to debate that. But working with him, I really saw a hard-working guy who also, incidentally, was very good with everyone. he talked to the janitor and the production assistant the same way he talked to the studio head, and I love that about him. In fact, when I met him, he puts his hand on my shoulder and he goes, "You got good shoulders." And then he points at my gut and goes, "But you look like you've been relaxing." And then John Milius, my boss who put him in Conan, was with me. I brought him down because we were doing reshoots on Collateral Damage on stage 12, I think. And he looks at Milius and he goes, "And you look like you have all of Lake Mead in you." You know, because Milius is a Hemingway-esque rotund guy. And it was just hilarious, and you couldn't help but like the guy. And I've got more Schwarzenegger moments I'd share rather later on, because this is really about Commando. But you can feel like he was still trying to get under his feet.
Yeah.
In certain ways when he did this movie.
And you can't question the guy's work ethic. I mean, he came from a point when he really should not have been a star, other than he was in great shape, you know.
Right.
And built an amazing career.
Yeah, and well worth, hardest working guy in the business, or certainly one of them. And what this feels like to me is not so much a script, but so much actors, you know, at the coffee shop creating interesting set pieces and trying to thread it into a movie, which is, for example, to break it down for the audience, all right, spoilers, it came out like in 1985. But his unit is getting knocked off. They put him in some sort of protective custody, and they find out that one of his old rivals who was expelled from his unit is really not only killing these guys for whatever reason, but trying to get to him to hold his daughter hostage, to get him to go to some foreign country and kill the president. That's all real. I'm not even making...
Alyssa Milano, right? That's his daughter in the movie, Alyssa Milano.
So they capture his daughter. He's not one to buy into the plan. They put him on a plane to a fictional country called Valverde or something. And while on the plane, he decides to kill the guy, he's dead tired, who's like his chaperone to this hellhole. And he gets up, he hides him under a blanket. Don't bother my friend, he's dead tired. He works his way through the actual airplane. He knows his way around a 747, gets downstairs into the cargo bay, goes out the landing gear, rides the wheel. I mean,
as you do.
That's how it does. And literally, as this thing is, you know, taking off, he jumps, hits a swamp at the edge of the runway, pops out, the music kicks in, and he's on his way to, you know, basically open a can of whoop ass on these terrorists, which is great, right? It's a mechanism that, you know, look, ridiculous as it is, the movie's on its way, this movie has a certain kind of audience, but then from there, they go to all these strange places. Strange meaning, like, for whatever reason, he follows the guy, Sonny, who is supposed to make sure the plane takes off and then leaves. He goes to the Sherman Oaks Galleria, where they film Fast Times. And for some reason, there's a meet there that he's got to be a part of. And it's just so they can have this action sequence in the mall. And I'm sure somebody thought, wouldn't it be great if he was swinging like Tarzan and fought all these security guards? Yeah. And the first thing that kind of comes to mind is why, you know, Sonny's neck isn't snapped earlier. Well, I think we know the answer, because he needs a few pages in the script to draw it out. But
now it is Sully, right? Is it Sully or Sonny?
Yeah, it's Sully. I'm sorry, I keep calling him Sonny.
I was going to say that's one actor is always consistent for playing those kind of sleazy characters. 48 Hours, Dreamscape. He's in, like, going way back. He always plays the Warriors.
Right, solid actor.
Yeah, solid actor. He's very good in that.
The cast, from Bill Duke to Vernon Wells, those guys are all very good. And I think they know better than most what kind of movie they're in, right? And so, of course, Sully gets one of the best lines, which is, "You're funny, Sully. That's why I'm going to kill you last." And he's like, "Well, you told me you'd kill me last." He's like, "I lied." What a surprise. So they have, all hell breaks loose in this shopping mall. Mark Lester told me that they used little people for some of the stunts in that, although I'll be damned if I can spot it.
Wow.
Yeah, he said that on Combat Radio, and I can't detect that anywhere. But Schwarzenegger at one point swings like Tarzan, gets on top of an elevator. He's fighting every security guard in the place, which at some point somebody's just got to pick up the phone and be like, "Hey man, I only make about $6 an hour, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call the fucking cops, and they're going to fight this RoboCop and this giant, and they're going to handle it." Because at one point, Sully runs to a phone booth, starts shooting out of it, but Matrix, the Schwarzenegger character, still charges it, flips the phone booth over his back, And of course, they have the dog pile scene where he bursts out and everyone goes flying. It's great. It's like a comic book action scene. It's absolutely brilliant.
It is. It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
But they're there simply just to rank. They like the set piece of it. There's absolutely no reason for the movie to realistically go there, but they like the set piece. They go car chase down Mulholland. Sully gets thrown off a cliff. Then they have to go to a hotel for whatever reason to meet the Bill Duke character, kill him there. Then they go from there to like a warehouse.
Green Beret line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way,
Yeah.
yeah, the famous eat green berets for breakfast, which by the way,
Angry. Yeah.
that both the scene, the line doesn't act, the line feels a little forced, and the scene needed to be kind of pushed along in editing. You can kind of see they were trying to, maybe didn't have the time they wanted to stage that scene out, but the editing in this film is actually brilliant, particularly towards the end. I think the editor is really one of the unseen heroes in this film who manages to piece this movie together. So they go to some warehouse, right? And this warehouse has like artillery pieces and tanks. It's like a warehouse in downtown Los Angeles. And from there they learn that there's an island off the coast of Santa Barbara where I guess they're marshaling up for some invasion. So they got to go to San Pedro, which is further south, steal a plane. And when they steal this plane, they're jumped by guerrillas who start machine gunning them. And luckily, they've since raided a Big Five, loaded up on weapons, got arrested, but been blasted out with a rocket launcher. We covered it. Yeah, he busts out. And then they go down to San Pedro. He loads everything on a plane. She can happen to fly it because she's up for the mission. This Radon Chong, we totally left her out.
She was a stewardess, right? She was the flight attendant.
She's a stewardess. Sully wants it. She's not having it. He takes, Schwarzenegger takes her hostage. She's an unwilling passenger, but she senses to buy into his lovable side, I guess.
Yeah.
She goes from, he's so talkative too. It's like, you're gonna kill me, aren't you? No. Yes, you are. You're lying to me. You wouldn't tell me if you would kill me. Yes, I would. Believe me.
That's all you got to say is believe me, trust me, and you're in.
Right, exactly. You're in. So she's along for the ride. She can happen to fly this plane. They've got to fly out of San Pedro for whatever reason. And there's guys machine gunning them. Like the San Pedro, port and the waterway, which my grandfather was police chief of San Pedro, and that was actually his turf, so I know it pretty well. And I can tell you some.
I have worked on probably 4 or 5 films that shot in San Pedro, and the amount of guerrillas you have to deal with and battle is crazy. I mean, it's it was almost like a documentary.
Right, it is unreal. I mean, it's completely in the hands of lawless guerrillas from third world countries. What's amazing is there's so many actual facets you can use to San Pedro that would have been epic in a movie like this, but for some reason they don't employ any of them. But they get on this, they hijack a seaplane. He has an Uzi, so he can one-hand machine gun down the gorilla. Like, I can't believe this airport/harbor facility is protected by third world guerrillas, but it is. So they fly up to Santa Barbara. What's that?
Trust me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm breaking it down for people who are too tired to actually sit through the movie, but they land in Santa Barbara. He fully gets into the G.I. Joe gear, and from there, it's lights out. He kills hundreds of people and, rescues his daughter. Look, it's a pretty straightforward film, and there's been some different stories about the production. One of my favorite stories, Jude, and maybe you've heard this one, Sven Thorsen, who was Arnold's longtime friend and companion on basically every movie.
Everything.
Running Man, Predator. He's in all those movies as well as a stunt guy. He said that at the wrap party or the screening for it afterwards, when they're having the premiere party, one of the producers came up to him and says, "So what do you think?" And Sven goes, "Well, to tell you the truth," he talks just like Arnold, "I feel like the movie is maybe a 5. And the guy was totally dejected, and he walked off like shattered. 3 minutes later, Schwarzenegger comes over to Sven. He's like, "Sven, what are you doing? You don't tell anyone the movie's a 5. This is Hollywood, man." He's like, "Sven, I know the movie's a goddamn 2. You don't see me telling everyone it's a 2. But what I love about the story is the honesty and the complete betrayal that they knew exactly what they were doing in the movie. And it was basically a payday and a step up for Schwarzenegger. It's a domestic action picture. He needed one. Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen the accounting on it, but I'm sure he walked away quite happy. They couldn't get him for a sequel. They wanted him. Commando 2. I don't know where you go with it, but
Going Commando.
yeah, I guess. But look, for people who like action movies with very little thought put into them, this is probably your movie. It's not.
Yeah.
I can't recommend it, but I also can't say it's a bad. I mean, it's a fun movie, I guess, is what I would say about it.
I always say I like movies for very different things. You know, I've worked with the Asylum guys that do Sharknado. They're friends of mine. I've been in some of their movies. I like Amelie and Cinema Paradiso and foreign art films and whatever. I mean, I like things for different reasons, and sometimes you just want a big cheesy escape, blow 'em up movie.
Right, and that's what this is.
Yeah. Sometimes you just want that.
But you made a great point out of the gate with movies like this, where at what point is the American taxpayer like ready to throw this domestic terrorist behind bars? Because literally he destroys everything with little thought. And he's in great shape for the film, as he always was. He was a total pro, and he's invested in it.
Yep.
In terms of the character he plays and what he's doing. And look, not all the dialogue fits. It was early in Schwarzenegger's career. I mean, he wasn't asked to speak in Conan, right? So,
right.
Very little dialogue. And then from there to Terminator. So this was like the first movie at the time, except for Hercules in New York when he was dubbed, where you have to put on him like, hey, you're going to have to speak here and act like a loving father.
Right.
So that's where he's got why don't they just call him Girl George? When the communists came to East Germany, they told him, rock and roll was offensive, or subversive. Maybe they were right. It's like, okay, look, the training wheels are still on, right? This is not what he does. Yeah. We'll get him there. But of course, what he does very well is once he suits up and brings the havoc, he does that. He's a master at that.
Well, there are actors that are brilliant. I mean, you could point to, say, Keanu Reeves, who I actually love. I think he's brilliant. But he shines when he's doing John Wicks and Speeds, where he doesn't have to do a lot of emotional range. I've seen him where he's been a very good actor in things, and I think he's maligned a little bit more than he probably should be. But that is his strength, that silent man of action sort of thing. And that's, though Arnold proved himself in, some comedy stuff and whatever as well, too. But, I think he grew into more of the talent. But, you shouldn't be giving him Shakespearean monologues and or dissertations in one of his early films.
Well, Arnold and Reeves both, I think, know their limitations. And look, acting is tough. This isn't a commentary on their skill set as actors. I think they both knew to play to certain strengths. Schwarzenegger picked very interesting movies in the 80s. I thought The Predator, The Running Man idea, those were all Total Recall. Yeah, True Lies. He picked interesting projects and did a real good battery of work, I think, personally, before we got him for Collateral Damage, which was supposed to be a vehicle for Harrison Ford, and that it was a rumor that his wife at the time, Maria Shriver, even took a crack at a rewrite. So there was 11 different writers on it. One of them was rumored to be the ghostwriter Maria Shriver, but that's a subject for another day. The guy, he knows when he's in his own wheelhouse, and he executes, and Commando is a lot of that. I mean... Yeah. Like, don't look for a movie you can sit back and nobody watches Commando and goes, yep, I get it. Yeah. I can see that. No, look, I mean, this thing would have gone to Chuck Norris or Van Damme. It would have gone to somebody else without a single change amongst the pages. I don't think Schwarzenegger had a creative meeting and said, you know what I need here? You know what we need? We need a moment where I'm bonding with my daughter and I'm carrying a log for whatever reason, because I got to chop firewood in the middle of summer,
right,
in my home up in Idlewild, and you notice all three chimneys are blazing when the military guys show up for the total aesthetic.
And I'm having an existential problems in my head that I have to work out. I mean, there's not a lot of going on beyond that. But but he's done some stuff lately that there was is it not Mandy? There's a film he did where it's a kind of a zombie film, but he has a relationship.
No, I think that is Mandy, right? Isn't it? Or
Mandy's unless they had two films named Mandy, that's the Nicolas Cage one where he's a crazy guy on a vendetta vengeance.
Wait. Hold up. Nicolas Cage plays a crazy guy on a vendetta vengeance?
Hard to believe.
Yeah. Obviously, that's I'm glad he's chewing new ground. All right, look, I like Cage. I like Cage for what you get with Cage, right? But getting back to the debacle at hand, of course, it ends with the heroic, almost no easy way out, Karate Kid like '80s big song, "We Fight for Love," which makes it all right. Like the fact that this guy stormed an island in Santa Barbara, killed 300 or 400 guerrillas, blew it sky high, blew up parts of downtown, just tore up the Sepulveda Galleria. Look, it's all good. He's trying to get his daughter back. Forget that there's actually people who can do this legally. You need to do it, and you need to destroy all of Southern California in the process.
And sometimes you have to sacrifice the lives of many to save one.
Right. Look, I get it. We're both parents. We'd probably do the same thing. But it is kind of, the Galleria back in its day was the home of a lot of shooting, including Fast Times, and they did not change it for any of these movies. So from a nostalgic point of view, it's fun to see it because we would have lunch there. We would eat at Perry's Pizza and hang out, and it was kind of home when we were growing up. So it's nice to see it in movies. I don't care if the action set piece actually has no direction and just kind of lands there and then moves on. It's fun to watch it, right? Look, and the cast is good. Vernon Wells told a lot of stories. Schwarzenegger didn't approve of him out of the gate. Wells had come from, he had a few movies since Road Warrior, but he basically played Wes, the crazy, in Road Warrior, right?
Right.
Showed up and had to prove himself. But, Siskel and Ebert reviewed the film, which I watched in preparation for this. And they said that they felt his character, Vernon Wells' character of Bennett, in his chainmail, was sort of representing like the gay community, and that Schwarzenegger had to beat the guy down because he represented. Now, that's a critic. That was Gene Siskel who said that, and I got to tell you, I've seen this movie 100 times. That never crossed my mind.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that somebody sees it a certain way, like he's got to beat up this guy because he's a representative of with the chainmail armor and the Really? I mean, come on. To me, he looked like the roadie for Judas Priest. I don't...
Yeah.
Well, he's part of Saxon. What do I know? But he's good in it. They're all good in it. And there's always that moment, too, where the villain gets the phone call, and he's like, "See." And he just takes a deep breath, and he just looks angry, and he puts down the phone. He's like, "Matrix did not get on the plane." And they all spring into action. Like, he must be coming here. It's like, no shit. You got his daughter.
Yeah.
It's like, I love that there's always this moment where they're stunned, like, this revolutionary plan is not going to plan.
Is there ever a point when henchmen just sort of question the tactics of their bosses? It's like, at some point you got to go, I don't, this is not smart,
Yeah, I think they do question. I think that's in the very early stages of planning when somebody says, "Look, we're going to kill his unit, but we're going to back a garbage truck up to his place in Calabasas." And that's when somebody puts their hand up and be like, "Look, can we just knife him in an alley someplace?" No. This is much better. Back up. It's like that scene in North by Northwest, right? The Hitchcock classic, where the scene that's actually missing from the movie is when the bad guys put together the plan to be like, "Look, let's lure him out to a highway in the middle of nowhere. Then, while he's waiting for a bus, we'll have a plane, a crop duster. But guess what, guys? It's not really a crop duster. It's going to come in and it'll kill him."
Yes.
And like nobody puts their hand up and be like, "Look, wouldn't it be easier just to gun him down?" No. This is much better. And what's great but careful, when you're on the highway, watch out because there's a lot of trucks. Don't fly too low. It's like it's like there's a beautiful scene, but the logistics and the mechanics that would actually make it in planning get us to that point is ridiculous. And Commando's loaded with that.
You could go on and on and on about that with Bond movies, which I love, but it's the arch villain that's going to talk to him for 15 minutes about how he's going to kill him instead of just killing him.
Yeah, exactly. Like, well, Mr. Bond, let me show you how this tank full of sharks and this slide work. It's brilliant. You're going to love this. Sit tight, Mr. Bond, just for a minute. Let me demonstrate. I got this mistress here. She's a pain in the ass. We're going to shoot her down the tube. She's going to go in the shark tank. She's dead. And then you're next, Mr. Bond. You're next. It's like...
But I have to leave for a few minutes to go take care of something. and I'll be back.
Exactly. Like there's always that post-concussion like huddle where, what do you mean he got away? We all walked away from this death trap and he somehow broke out. You know, the thing I can't figure out about Commando though is why even bother killing the former members of his unit? It's not like they're going to rally up, and was the plan for him to reassemble his unit to get his daughter back? Maybe, I don't know. But they kill these guys, and then they realize they're being killed by a guy thrown out from the unit, and it's just, I think it's just a way to start the movie off. And I've never talked to the screenwriter of this movie. I'd like to.
Which is actually a device that's been used a ton in subsequent films, you know, so it probably was a pioneer in that way too. But
well, we talked quite a bit about this with Mark Lester. Mark Lester, he hasn't been back to Combat Radio because he doesn't like doing the show when there's other guests, and obviously Combat Radio turns out to be kind of a creative bullpen where you just sort of deal with whoever walks in the door. But he was interesting, and he, look, the movie and his job on the movie, he's gotten a bad rap actually from other people, and I can't testify to any of that, but he delivers this movie for what it's worth. It's an A to Z action picture, and he packed it up.
He does, and that's, action's tough to pull off sometimes. And I've always enjoyed talking to him. We've always had very pleasant conversations. He, I'm a Stephen King fan, so I like Firestarter for all its issues. But he delivered on this, I think, for what it is.
Yeah.
If you're not looking for, Rashomon, or you're not looking for, Seventh Samurai or one of those, if you're not looking for high art and just a really good action film, I think this delivers. Yeah, it does. And honestly, it's tough to go wrong with Schwarzenegger, even at this stage in his career. It's fairly straightforward of what you're going to get. They're all skilled at delivering it. And look, you're not going to it's not rocket science. This is not a Shakespearean screenwriting example. This is basically, we're going to blow up a bunch of stuff. The audience is going to be totally into it. There's also that moment at the end, and all these movies have it, where he gets shot and he crawls away wounded. He hobbles. And Bennett's like, come on out. And he's like, Schwarzenegger, of course, has expended all his weapons except for the knife. So he talks him into a knife fight, which is always classic, where the villain who has the upper hand is like, yeah, you know what, I'm going to let my hostage go, and I'm going to fight you one-on-one, because that's what my temperament demands that I do. Absolutely. And you're kind of watching it going, oh, come on. It's like, that's why that moment in Raiders of the Lost Ark is so classic, when the crowd splits and he just guns the guy down, because that's what most people would do. But in a movie like Commando, I guess you gotta engage. So what's your favorite scene from the movie? I mean, I think I like the Sully one, because I just like that actor so much, and I think he, just the holding him there and the letting him go and the death on that. I think that guy to me is eminently watchable. I do like, just because it always makes me smile, is the scenes like the rocket launcher shooting backwards and blowing up the building or stuff like that, because there's a part of me that always goes, yes, and then there's another part of me that just wants to think about it so logically that it just, but I don't know. I guess that's it. I mean, everything you just sort of said about the mall and all sort of the incongruity of that, but I do love as much as it makes no sense, I do love when people blow stuff up. And so, I think the fact that anybody would grab the rocket launcher, what's got four rockets in it or whatever, and well, I read about it. Don't look at it too closely in that scene is my advice. And now, if you do, you'll know why I'm saying that. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I just I think those stand out for me. I love that she pulls up alongside the paddy wagon, and the cops think she's a prostitute. Brilliant detective work by our LAPD. But she's in a convertible, and no one happens to notice all the armaments in the back seat. They just notice her, and for whatever reason, she pulls alongside, and then they pull away, and she decides to light him up with an RPG round. Fine, whatever. I mean, at this point, it's like, You just got to go with it. You just got to
Right.
ride the coaster. Yeah.
Do it, blow it up. And, he's in there, like I said earlier, pleading, like, call Colonel Kirby. If you call him, this will all be explained. Okay. There's obviously a hotline we can call where domestic terrorists are let out of the paddy wagon. They're let out of their cells just with a simple explanation over the phone. Whatever. Look, it goes with the. We're trying to get to a certain place, which is where he can rack up a body count, and he does. Radon Chong's good in it. Bill Duke's good in it. They're all good in it. I wonder what the original draft looked like, because a lot of these actors are really good, and you almost think that there was probably some more scenes for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's always interesting to read. I have a bunch of old, scripts that came from the first draft. And you probably saw tons of that when you were developing and stuff.
Oh yeah.
It's always interesting to read those early drafts, because the changes that things go through, sometimes when 2, 3, 4, 10, 12 other writers get involved, it's and I don't think most of the time for the better. I think there comes a point when everybody's got to put their mark on it somehow, and it just gets diluted.
You make an interesting point. Rarely are these scripts rewritten and improved, in my mind. It's usually sort of dumbed down, but that way everyone can sort of justify their input, when the best thing an executive can do is let the magic happen. Like, don't get in the way of the creative progression. Don't feel you have to chime in. And I saw that with I Am Legend, which was another Schwarzenegger vehicle once upon a time, and Ridley Scott was attached to direct. Brilliant draft, second draft, 70% of what the first draft was, third draft, 50% of what and I'm like, why are we doing this? Just sit back and say, this is the movie, go. Just put the bricks in place and get the movie going. Schwarzenegger had his heart attack, and he has said since that that's the reason he didn't move forward with not just I Am Legend, but really with a relationship with Warner Brothers. And these are the
That point, what did he just come off of?
I can't remember. He had the heart attack prior to me actually being there. I mean, I joined the mailroom in 2000. I joined feature development maybe about a year and 4 months after that. But what was great about being in feature development at Warner Brothers is you could walk into the story department, and Jason Cooper, shout out to Jason Cooper, who ran it for John Wayne's granddaughter, Teresa Wayne, was in charge. And you can get a script to any movie if you wanted to read it and do your research. Just say, look, I need Beetlejuice 2. And there was a Beetlejuice 2 script there called Beetlejuice. And be like, hand it to me. And you would just read all the stuff just to kind of see what people's thoughts were, and what creative ideas you could lift or reinterpret somewhere else. I mean, because that's all the job is reinventing. And
I had a script years ago. This is going back years, and it got optioned almost immediately, and it was that classic thing of they came to me and they said, and this was a literal note, just add like 25 more pages. And I was like, 25 more pages of what? And I'm like, I don't know, just throw some more action in there or whatever. And it was like nothing, no constructive, no whatever. And they just were throwing notes in for the sake of notes. And so I added a bunch of stuff, and they went, and this is, I'm not embellishing this. They went, when they read, they got back to me and went, yeah, it's good. It's just, I feel like it's a little long.
Of course.
And I'm like, are you kidding me? And it just drives, I think, as a writer, and reading a lot of the original stuff and seeing where they ended up on, on the screen. It's just like, you liked a project for a reason. Why not go with that? Things are going to evolve and change and whatever, but why not? You bought it for a reason. You liked it for a reason, whatever film it is.
When I left Bel Air Productions, and my boss there, producer Steve Ruther, who was partners with Michael Douglas, has since passed away, but I actually worked for a short time as a writer, primarily as a script doctor, and I did script work for John Divins, the producer of Blade, for Dark Horse Comics, and I sold a 58-page horror script, which was complete nonsense. It was just an interesting idea, but it was a real rough script, and producer Paul D'Souza optioned it. He optioned it for 2 years, and then ultimately just said, look, I'm just going to cut you a low-end deal, get it off your hands. And I'm like, fine. I'm pretty much out of the business because now I'm a family man, and that's really what my focus was. And it was a 58-page, very rough script. Like I said, maybe an interesting idea, but not a script that was there yet. But the thing about it was, my agent at the time, Margaret Royfey, who was brilliant, says, look, this is what's selling. If you can come up with horror ideas, you're home free. And the worst thing about that was I wasn't really considered myself, A, a writer. I was just doing it to pay the bills. Or B, a horror writer, because there's much better people doing that. But I'm like, okay, if this is paying the bills, I'm going to create 30 or 40 of these junk scripts that are nifty ideas, and that's what people would do. They would option and buy these things and have someone rewrite them 100 times. And finally you're like, okay, thank you. But it led to me focusing on a job I didn't really want to do and a genre I didn't actually love. I just felt intriguing around Halloween. I mean, I'd write like 9 scripts between August and October 31st. And then suddenly I'd think, all right, I'm done with it. But yeah, my first script sale to producer Paul D'Souza put me on a wicked horror sort of development track, and then the rest is history or lack of history, depending on how you look at it. But yeah, you're right. They
and out of those, did you see some of them get made?
No, everything ended up in turnaround. But look, yes, you'd want to see things get made, but to be honest with you, having not the drive to be in the business anyway, and just doing it because it was fun or it was a job, as soon as the check was cut, I was good. Do whatever you're going to do with it. Rip it apart. I wasn't too attached to it. And I worked with producer John Divens on 2 or 3 projects. One that had Justin Timberlake attached and one that had Jamie Foxx attached. And I'd get their notes. But when you're in the script doctor process and you're writing for someone's specific notes, like you just referenced notes, it's not creative and it's not very fun.
No, I always say, I on a lot of the shows I did, I would be hired to come in and sort of fix a show that was problematic or whatever. And it's always so much harder to me. Some people are brilliant at it. It's always so much harder to me to fix somebody else's problems than to create something, from scratch. And sometimes the notes are just so contradictory,
right,
that it's just hard to know where to go.
I remember the first batch of notes I read when I was in feature development, and everything was put as we. It came from one person's office, but she worded it as we. Like there was a legion of people unified to make sure they enforced this change. And I was like, who the fuck is we? I mean, it's and I can't remember. It wasn't Courtney Valente, whose dad, Jack Valente, ran the academy. She was an executive there. I'm trying to think. Jessica Goodman, maybe? Anyway, that was the first batch of notes I read, and it was interesting because there was like psychological logic attached to the note to make you react a certain way. But the thing with I Am Legend, which ultimately was made with Will Smith, I can't figure out if it's good, why not just make it? Like, why are we going to needle this thing to death? And who was it? Which book? My former boss, president of Bel Air Productions, Alan Stewart, was ripped apart in a book. It may have been Goldman's book, who just said that she specialized in taking great scripts and quote unquote needling them into shit.
Oh, wow.
Now, I never saw that practice, and I was only at Bel Air for a short time, but I just remember reading that she was cited as someone who quote unquote needled things into shit. Maybe they needed needling, I don't know, but it kind of makes one think, like, were we better off with one studio head running the studio and calling the shots before there was like a committee of executives that you had to kind of get the approval process through?
Well, and corporate interest and shareholder, everything. I mean, that's why I always say that period of the 70s to me was such a great period. Godfather, Sting, Jaws, all the stuff we can talk about, Exorcist and Star Wars and all that stuff, where they had a sort of creative freedom to do, and there wasn't necessarily all this, corporate interest or studio interest or any of that stuff dictating things that had to be in there. I just think it was such a much freer time.
Well, what's interesting is today's movie, produced by Joel Silver, who walked around Warner Brothers in his pajamas. Commando feels very much like a studio-driven, consensus-driven picture, where we just talked about Jaws, and Jaws feels like one guy and a few professionals out on an island trying to make a movie who ultimately has the talent to see it through. And, I used to joke with Carl Gottlieb that, the scene that's missing is the scene where the studio exec walks into the production office and says, hey, you know, the mayor needs to slip off the dock, and we need to see the mayor get bitten in half, because that'll get a cheer from the audience.
Yeah.
And in reality, when you watch Jaws, the mayor just fades away because it becomes about, forget the stupid bureaucracy, we're going to kill this fucking shark. But you can almost now, people can now make jokes at where the studio note would be.
Yeah, yeah.
And I could see the guys in Commando saying, you know what we need here? We need a car chase. So why don't you have them storm the Galleria and race up and down Mulholland? When Mulholland, geographically, en route to fucking San Pedro, wherever you need to get there, is like, it feels like we need a car chase.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and the only thing that's missing is Sully, when he drops him off the cliff, landing in some film producer's pool in the Hollywood Hills. Like, he doesn't hit the rocks. Because those are all that territory is loaded with homes stacked on top of each other. He just needs to come crashing down through somebody's skylight, and that, you know, and it should have been a cameo by Joel Silver having a drink, being like, it's a bad guy, you know. Anyway, that's my studio note.
Yeah.
Of course, with movies like this, I would always get yelled at because my suggestion is the only way this movie's going to get better is if it's shot entirely with puppets.
You can't go wrong with a movie shot. Well, maybe you can, because I think they tried one recently, but it's hard to go wrong with a movie shot.
Right. I mean, that was my suggestion when we took on the Exorcist prequels, and
which they sort of did with Team America eventually.
Right. Team America proved you can do it, right? It's basically a Bruckheimer movie with puppets. And, you know, of course, I'm saying, like, let's just, the only thing that'll save this is with puppets. But that kind of humor is not appreciated when you're in feature development. Like, you're seen as almost a traitor when you make those kind of jokes. It shows you have no belief in the project. And quite frankly, I think a little more honesty like that would serve some of these studios better. I think some of the executives need to hear, like, hold up, that idea sucks. That's a dumb idea.
Well, you know, people talk a lot about this with, like, you know, George Lucas, who I love. I'm a diehard Star Wars fan, and I'm a diehard American Graffiti fan and all that. But, you know, there is a reason for Raiders of the Lost Ark 4, you know, which is when you get to a point where nobody tells you no.
Right.
You know, and when you get to a point where nobody says, not even just no, but just, you know, what about this instead? Or, you know, maybe let's not do this or whatever. Then I think, you know, and I think that's what happens when people get to a certain point where they just are, you know, irreproachable. And I do think that there are some directors, probably I would say Spielberg among them, you know, that we talked about earlier, who still steps back and looks and tries to see if, you know, it's the right thing to do, or if he should do it, if that should be added, if it should not, if he can do something differently. And I think he is, you know, fairly consistent.
He's always been a strong director, and I feel he's one you can trust. I think a lot of directors, if they're allowed to actually do what they want to artistically, would probably ultimately deliver it. You know, the fine line is it's the Heaven's Gate scenario because of that debacle at UA. You know, everything's kind of governed now, and rightfully so. I mean, I agree with Bill Daley, a former VP at Warner Brothers, who to this day still does radio work with me. And he says, look, if you want us to pay for it, we're going to have some say in how it goes. And I can't argue with that. I don't mind the say in how it goes, but I just mind the stupid say in how it goes, I guess. And that's the thing, like the studio sometimes pushes for things that you don't necessarily need. And then there's other times when the director is totally off base and totally out of his mind, which I don't know why he's on the project in the first place. Like I remember when Deep Blue Sea was going and Bill Sandell, who we do a lot of radio with, who was the production designer on Hocus Pocus and RoboCop, was called in by Alan Horn to save it. Like, go down to Mexico and save this movie. And I'm like, why are we doing this fucking movie in the first place? Why are we doing this fucking movie in the first place? Deep Blue Sea.
Deep Blue Sea, yeah.
It's just always hilarious when Rennie Harlan was the solution. Rennie Harlan can direct, make no mistake about it. But, you know, he had, again, like Schwarzenegger, he had a wheelhouse. You know, and I feel like, okay, we're going to put him in a situation where it's a CGI shark, and I just feel like it was, why are we doing it?
Yeah. I think Rennie's sweet spot was Long Kiss Goodnight and those kind of things, but he did Long Kiss Goodnight, right?
He did with his ex-wife, Gina Davis.
Yes. And then, you know, the pirate movie or whatever it was, just, you know, I just think he was really in his element in certain films. And I think
Throat Island.
Yeah, Cutthroat Island. Cutthroat Island.
Don't get me started. But Gina Davis has gone on to be an Olympic champion in archery, so props to her. I met her once, and I swear to God, she was 2 inches taller than I was, and I'm 6'2".
That's crazy. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. I just was stunned.
Yeah.
I was like, "You're Gina Davis?" Where I met Schwarzenegger, and he's 2 inches shorter than me. He comes up to about my eye. But like I said, Commando, all things aside, Schwarzenegger was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. He delivers for sure.
Yeah, I remember when we were on Collateral Damage, I had to run a trailer down to him to approve. One to him, one to his publicist, 2 video cassettes. That tells you how long ago this was. And I see a production assistant outside his trailer, outside the stage. His trailer is right outside the stage. And this production assistant has since gone on to work for Tom Cruise. But I pull up and I say, "Hey, give this to Schwarzenegger when you see him. He needs to approve it." And he's like, "No, don't hand me that. Please don't hand me that. Schwarzenegger hates me, dude. He hates me. He never talks to me. He hates me. Please don't make me hand that to him." I'm like, "I don't have time for this. I got to find the publicist. Give this to Schwarzenegger and tell him to look at it. I'm going to come back and get his approval." No. Please don't. Ethan, please don't hand me that." Finally, Schwarzenegger's in his trailer and he hears this. And we didn't realize it. So he comes out and he's like, "What's going on out here?" And so I look to him and I'm like, "Arnold, this dude thinks you don't like him." And Arnold looks him down and up and goes, "Well, I don't." And the guy was just, now I got that he was kidding, but this PA was just devastated. So I finally, and I make it worse, but I'm like, "Oh, dude, you were absolutely right. He doesn't like you. Arnold, can you approve this trailer real quick?" And it's like everyone's in tune. Like even the grips are kind of laughing, but he's just like Charlie Brown, this guy. And later I'm like, "Dude, he's kidding. He's kidding. He does not, he's got a job to do. He doesn't give a fuck about that. Just relax." And so much of our job at Warner Brothers was just basically being psychologist and talking people off the ledge at times. Like don't.
Part of the job, isn't it? Talking people off the ledge. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I can recommend Commando. Oh, of course I can. I always tell people to go see the movie. Yeah, go see it. Go see it. Form your own opinion about it. Love it, hate it, watch it 3 times in a row. I will say this, James Horner does the music, and it is literally riff for riff. The Aliens theme, basically, is what it sounds like to me. Particularly when he busts into the warehouse full of tanks. What the fuck's that doing in LA? I don't know. Gorillas, I guess, can rent warehouses and put tanks together. But that sounds exactly like Aliens. But
yeah.
You be the judge. All right, so we'll come back next week with 2 other movies. Hopefully one equally as disastrous, because it's all fun to kick a bad movie around. And we'll probably try and tie in a good one. For me here at Combat Radio, Jude, final thoughts on Commando and anything the audience needs to know.
I said it earlier, it's just, sometimes you just need to blow up shit. Sometimes you just need a fun escape movie, and this probably fills the bill as good as any of them,
That is so well put, and that should have been the tagline on the trailer. Sometimes you just need to blow up shit. Right? Sometimes you just need to blow up shit. Absolutely.
That's right.
Oh, man.
It's a fun one.
Yeah, it is a fun one. All right, for Combat Radio, go to Brigade-Radio-One for the show, highlights, and the show itself entire. We never know until it gets through editorial, but you may get this whole show or part of it on YouTube sometime soon, if the editors can ever fucking catch up with the workload. God bless our editorial department. They're heroes. All right, everyone, we'll catch you next time.